Well, if he had a real economy drive going, it'd be all right, but he saved about $500 million in 2 weeks and signed bills that'll eventually cost $8 billion. One educational bill that Kennedy, well, let's put it the other way, President Kennedy got 15 times more than he asked for, and Johnson had a chance to be a real economizer and veto it, but he didn't do it. So when he shows some signs of real, sincere economizing, I'll say, cheer, cheer, let's go. But so far, he's only fooling the public. I haven't changed any on him, and I don't think we ought to relax our relations with him. We ought to get a little tougher with him.
Senator, do you have any preference for vice presidential running mate?
No, the only thing I'm looking for now are delegates.
Senator, do you concede, sir, that the assassination of the president did hurt your chances in the South?
Oh, I think you'd have to be honest and say that it would. You have now a president who is a Southerner. At least he called off a Southerner. That's going to have an effect because the chairman of the committees are mostly Southerners, and they want to be in with the president. But I want to wait and hear the State of the Union message next week, and I think then we can take a reassessment and many more reassessments. I'm not surprised about anything that's happened. His great popularity at the present time. After all, we've had a moratorium that we Republicans very carefully observed, and we tried to help him, and we will try to help him. First, I want to, on behalf of my family, and 3 of them are back here and the other 2 are lost, my wife and my oldest daughter, Mrs. Ross, and my youngest daughter, Peggy, my son, Michael, and my son, Barry, who is busy working in Los Angeles. I want to welcome you to Arizona and welcome you to Binunikin. Binunikin in Navajo means house on the top of the hill. Ever since the last Republican convention, thousands of Americans have asked me to seek the Republican presidential nomination in 1964. Now, I've withheld a decision until now, not to be politically coy, but because I've been giving every aspect of such a decision the most serious consideration. Today, here at our home in the state that I love, with my family and with the people whose friendship and political interest have placed me where I am, I want to tell you 2 things. First, I want to tell you that I will seek the Republican presidential nomination. And I've decided to do this because of the principles in which I believe and because I'm convinced that millions of Americans share my belief in those principles. I've decided to do this also because I have not heard from any announced Republican candidate a declaration of conscience or of political position that could possibly offer to the American people a clear choice in the next presidential election. Now, one of the great attributes of our American 2-party system has always been the reflected differences in principle. As a general rule, one party has emphasized individual liberty and the other has favored the extension of government power. I am convinced that today a majority in the Republican Party believes in the essential emphasis on individual liberty. Now, I've been spelling out my position for 10 years in the Senate and for years before that here in my own state. And I'll spell it out even further in the months to come. Back in the first senatorial campaign that I engaged in, I was asked by a very prominent member of the press in this state, "What kind of a Republican are you?" And I replied that I was not a Me Too Republican, and this still holds. I won't change my beliefs to win votes. I will offer a choice, not an echo. This will not be an engagement of personalities. It will be an engagement of principles. I've always stood for government that is limited and balanced and against ever-increasing concentrations of authority in Washington. I've always stood for individual responsibility and against regimentation. I believe we must now make a choice in this land and not continue drifting endlessly down toward a time when all of us, all of our lives, our property, our hopes, and even our prayers will become just cogs in a vast government machine. I believe that we can win victory for freedom both at home and abroad. And I believe that we can be strong enough and determined enough to win those victories without war. And I believe that appeasement and weakness can only bring war. I have asked, and I will continue to ask across this country, why not victory? Why not victory for sound constitutional principles in government? Why not victory over the evils of communism? I am convinced that in this year of 1964, we must face up to our conscience and make a definite choice. We must decide what sort of people we are and what sort of a world we want, now and for our children. My candidacy is pledged to a victory for principle and to presenting an opportunity for the American people to choose. Let there be a choice, right now and in clear, understandable terms. And I ask all those who feel and believe as I do to join with me in assuring both the choice and the victory. Now, the second thing I wanted to tell you is that I will continue with all my strength to work for America and for Arizona in my service in the Senate. I have previously announced that I will file for re-election to the Senate, and I find no incompatibility in these two candidacies. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, if you have some questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them in the few moments that we have.